The meeting hall of Harmony's Edge stretched wide enough to hold representatives from 40 different species. Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat in the human delegation section, her hands folded neatly on the smooth table surface. She wore the same patient smile she always did during these council sessions. Next to her, Commander James Wright reviewed data on his tablet, while Dr. Amara Okonkwo quietly translated the side conversations happening in various alien languages. High Arbiter Sarnak stood at the central podium, his forearms gesturing dramatically as he spoke. The Kethran was tall, covered in dark green scales that caught the station's artificial light. His species had a reputation throughout the galaxy. They were aggressive, territorial, and very good at finding legal loopholes to take what they wanted. "The evidence is clear," Sarnak declared, his voice carrying through the translation system to all the delegates. "The settlement charter for the world you call New Providence was signed under false pretenses. The humans misunderstood the terms. According to Section 47, Paragraph 12 of the Galactic Settlement Act, worlds claimed through documentation errors default to the species that held prior exploratory rights." Lena listened without interrupting. She had heard this argument building for weeks now. The Kethrons wanted New Providence, a thriving human colony with 2 million people living on it. The planet was rich in rare minerals and sat at a strategic location along several trade routes. Sarnak had spent the last 3 hours presenting twisted interpretations of treaties that were 100 years old around the circular chamber. Other species watched the proceedings with familiar discomfort. The Delphine representative, an aquatic being named Thalassa, floated in her water-filled tank with what might have been sympathy. The crystalline Vradix called Harmony of Angles refracted light in patterns that suggested unease. The insectoid representatives from the Chiton Collective clicked their mandibles quietly. Even the gaseous Etherians seemed to swirl with agitation in their containment fields. They had all seen this before. The Kethrans would make demands backed by complicated legal arguments. The targeted species would protest. The council would debate. Eventually, the Kethrans would get something close to what they wanted because nobody wanted to actually fight them. The Kethran Dominion had 12 massive warships and hundreds of support vessels. They had conquered 40 star systems over the past 3 centuries. And the humans? Everyone knew about the humans. They were polite to a fault. They apologized when others bumped into them. They smiled through insults and never raised their voices. In 200 years of council membership, humanity had never once threatened military action. They were useful for trade and had interesting cultural exports, but nobody considered them a real power. Sarnak finished his presentation and turned toward the human delegation. "Ambassador Vasquez, surely you can see the wisdom in a peaceful transfer of New Providence to Dominion control. We would, of course, allow your colonists time to relocate. Perhaps 6 months?" Alina stood slowly, her movements calm and measured. "High Arbiter Sarnak, thank you for that comprehensive presentation. The human delegation would like to request a 24-hour recess to fully consider the Dominion's legal perspective and prepare our response." Sarnak's eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded. "Of course. The Dominion is always willing to allow adequate time for understanding." The council chairman, an elderly Vradix whose crystal formations spoke of centuries of life, announced the recess. As the delegates began filing out, Sarnak leaned toward one of his aides and spoke in the Kethran language. He assumed, like most species did, that humans only spoke their own tongue and relied on translation devices for everything else. "Soft-skinned submission beasts," he hissed. "They will roll over like all prey species do. New Providence will be ours within a month." Dr. Okonkwo heard every word. She spoke 17 languages fluently, including Kethran. She had spent 5 years living among the Dominion's lower classes, studying their culture for her doctoral thesis. Her face remained perfectly neutral as she followed Alina and Wright. Out of the chamber, the human quarters on Harmony's Edge were modest. 3 connected rooms with basic furniture and communications equipment. Once the door sealed behind them and Wright activated the privacy field, the atmosphere changed immediately. Alina dropped into a chair and rubbed her temples. "I'm getting too old for this performance." Wright pulled up holographic displays showing New Providence's current status. The colony was already evacuating non-essential personnel, just in case. Defense satellites were being quietly armed. The population had voted overwhelmingly to resist any Kethran takeover. The legal argument is nonsense, Wright said flatly. I had our AI analyze every word. He's claiming exploratory rights based on a Kethran survey ship that passed through the system 80 years ago and did nothing but take some readings. By that logic, they could claim half the settled galaxy. It doesn't matter if it's nonsense, Alina replied. The Council won't push back hard enough to stop it. They never do. Dr. Okonkwo sat down and pulled up her own files. I recorded his comment as we left. In Kethron, he called us soft-skinned submission beasts and said we would roll over like all prey species. Wright snorted. Prey species. That's rich. Elena's personal communication device chimed. She checked the encrypted message and her expression shifted slightly. Something hardened in her eyes that had never shown during any council session. She read the message twice before looking up at her colleagues. That's the message from Earth Command, she said quietly. The Council of Nations has voted. They've reviewed the Kethron demands and the strategic situation. Wright leaned forward and, as of 1 hour ago, Alina said, now she was smiling in a way that would have confused anyone who had only seen her diplomatic face. We are no longer operating under Protocol Sigma. Courtesy mode is officially deactivated. There was a moment of silence in the room. Then Wright actually laughed, a sound of genuine amusement mixed with something that might have been relief. Finally, he breathed. Finally. I've been wearing kid gloves for 20 years. Dr. Okonkwo pulled up a new set of files on her display. These were not the cultural exchange documents and historical analyses she usually worked with. These were detailed breakdowns of Kethran military capacity, psychological profiles, and strategic vulnerabilities.
Oh.
Do you want to play this? Wright asked. Alina stood and walked to the window overlooking the station's central hub. Ships from dozens of species docked and departed in carefully coordinated patterns. Somewhere out there, the Kethrans were probably celebrating their anticipated victory. They thought they knew humans. They thought they understood what humanity was. They were about to learn differently. Tomorrow's session is going to be very educational, Elena said. I think it's time the Council learned what human courtesy actually means. And more importantly, what happens when we stop using it. Wright and Okonkwo exchanged glances. They had both been waiting for this day since they joined the diplomatic corps. Every smile through insult, every careful word, every measured response had been building toward this moment. Get me everything we have on Kethron expansion, Alina ordered. Every world they've taken, every species they've bullied, every legal trick they've used. And James, I want a full inventory of our actual military capacity ready to display. Not the outdated information we've been feeding the Council. The real numbers, already prepared, Wright confirmed. Alina turned back from the window, and her smile had become something sharper. Then let's show them what humans look like when we take the gloves off. The council chamber filled slowly the next morning. Representatives floated, walked, skittered, or drifted to their designated areas. The atmosphere felt routine. Another day, another debate that would probably end with the Kethrans getting most of what they wanted. Several smaller species had already drafted statements supporting the Dominion's claim, not because they believed in it, but because disagreeing with the Kethrans was dangerous. Alina Vasquez entered with her delegation. And to those paying attention, something seemed different. Her smile was still there, but it sat differently on her face. Commander Wright walked with his shoulders straighter. Dr. Okonkwo carried a data tablet that seemed heavier than usual with information. The council chairman called the session to order. We will now hear the human response to the Kethran Dominion's proposal regarding New Providence. Sarnak settled into his seat, all four arms relaxed. He had already prepared his counter-arguments to whatever weak protests the humans would offer. Alina stood, but she did not approach the central podium. Chairman, before we respond to the specific proposal, we request permission to provide educational context about human diplomatic protocols. We believe this information is relevant to the Council's understanding of our response. The chairman's crystal formations shifted with confusion. Educational context. Ambassador Vasquez, this is highly irregular. I understand, Chairman. However, the human delegation believes that the Council has been operating under significant misunderstandings about humanity for the past 2 centuries. We wish to correct these misunderstandings before proceeding. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Thalassa, the delphine, swirled in her tank with interest. This was not typical human behavior. The humans always followed protocol exactly. Very well, the chairman said. You may proceed. Dr. Okonkwo stepped forward and activated the central display. An image of Earth appeared, rotating slowly. It looked peaceful from space. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. A beautiful world. This is Earth, Okonkwo began. Many of you have seen images of our home world. Most species describe it as serene. However, you should understand what life on Earth actually means. Act. The display changed. Now it showed various creatures from Earth's history. Predators with sharp teeth. Ancient humans hunting with primitive weapons. Archaeological sites showing evidence of warfare. Humanity evolved on a death world, Okonkwo stated flatly. We know many species find this term dramatic, but it is accurate. Our planet contains thousands of species that evolved specifically to kill. Large predators that could tear humans apart, small creatures with venom that could stop our hearts, diseases that killed millions. And through all of this, humans not only survived, but became the dominant species. She pulled up more images. Ancient battles. Medieval warfare. The world wars with their massive casualty counts. Nuclear explosions. The display showed weapons that made several council members recoil. For 10,000 years of recorded history, humanity's primary occupation was killing other humans. We developed thousands of ways to do it efficiently. We created weapons that could level cities. We invented concepts like total war, where entire civilizations mobilized to destroy each other. We built bombs powerful enough to end all life on our planet. The chamber had gone very quiet. Even Sarnek was watching with newfound attention. By the time we achieved spaceflight, Okonkwo continued, humans had fought approximately 14,000 wars. We had killed roughly 1 billion of our own species through direct conflict. This does not include deaths from famine, disease, and other indirect results of warfare. Harmony of Angles, the Vradix representative, spoke up. Dr. Okonkwo, we were aware that humans came from a conflict-rich background. Your first contact reports mention this. Why are you reviewing your history now? Because, Okonkwo said, I do not believe the Council truly understood what those sanitized reports meant. You read about human conflict the way one might read about primitive tribal disputes. You did not grasp the scale or the sophistication. She brought up detailed technical specifications. Weapons systems that the Council had no classifications for. Strategic doctrines developed over millennia. Methods of warfare that made the Kethran military look simple by comparison. Humanity did not stop being violent because we became enlightened, Okonkwo explained. We stopped because we became too good at violence. We reached a point where continuing meant extinction, so we made a choice. We decided to turn our aggressive instincts outward, toward space exploration, scientific advancement, and yes, toward diplomacy. Lena stood and joined Okonkwo at the display, which brings us to Protocol Sigma. Dr. Okonkwo, please explain to the Council what that means. Protocol Sigma is the formal name for what we call courtesy mode, Okonkwo said. When humanity joined the Galactic Council 200 years ago, we knew we were different. We knew our natural behaviors would frighten other species. So we developed Protocol Sigma. The display showed a comparison. On one side, typical human diplomatic behavior as the Council knew it. Smiling, apologizing, agreeing, compromising. On the other side, statistics showing what human behavior looked like without the protocol. The difference was startling. Under Protocol Sigma, human diplomats suppress approximately 90% of their natural confrontational responses. Every smile you have seen from us was calculated. Every apology was strategic. Every time we backed down from conflict, we were making an active choice to do so, not because we were afraid, but because we wanted to be accepted into galactic society. Commander Wright stood now, joining his colleagues at the display. We wanted friends, not subjects. We wanted trade partners, not territories. We wanted to prove that humans could be civilized, that we could control our instincts. For 200 years, Alina added, we have watched the dynamics of this council. We have seen aggressive species like the Kethrans take what they want through legal manipulation and military threats. We have seen peaceful species live in constant low-level fear. We have seen the Council's enforcement mechanisms fail repeatedly because no one wants to actually fight. Letting her words translate through every system in the chamber. We stayed in courtesy mode through all of it. We smiled and nodded and played the role of the naive newcomers. But courtesy is a choice, not a constraint. It is something we do, not something we are. Sarnak rose from his seat, his scales darkening with anger. Is this meant to frighten us? You think showing us your primitive history changes anything? The Dominion has conquered 40 star systems. We are not impressed by images of ancient human warfare. Commander Wright turned to face the Kethran directly. His expression was calm, but there was something in his eyes that had never been there during council sessions. Something predatory. Hi, Arbiter. How many of those 40 systems shot back? The question hung in the air. Sarnak's mouth opened, then closed. How many of those conquests, Wright continued, his voice quiet but carrying through the chamber, involved an opponent who was actually trying to kill you? How many times have you fought someone who matched your technological level and still wanted to fight? How many times have you faced an enemy that was better at war than you are? Alina stepped forward again. As of yesterday, Earth's Council of Nations voted to deactivate Protocol Sigma in our dealings with the Kethran Dominion. We are no longer operating in courtesy mode. She pulled up a new document on the central display. This is our counter-proposal. The Kethran Dominion will immediately withdraw all claims on New Providence. Additionally, the Dominion will return 3 previously conquered systems to their native populations: Tarvik, Hellion Prime, and Kessler Station. The Dominion will pay reparations to New Providence for the emotional distress caused by this claim. And High Arbiter Cernak will issue a formal apology to humanity for referring to us as soft-skinned submission beasts and prey species. The chamber erupted. Species began talking over each other in dozens of languages. Sarnak's scales had turned nearly black with rage. This is insanity. He roared, "You cannot make such demands. This violates every principle of council negotiation." "No," Alina said, and now her smile was gone completely. "This violates every principle of courtesy mode negotiation. You have 48 hours to agree to these terms. The clock starts now." The chairman tried to restore order, his crystal body flashing with agitation. "Ambassador Vasquez, you cannot simply issue ultimatums. This is not how the council operates." Then perhaps Alina said, gathering her materials and preparing to leave, "It is time the council learned a new way to operate." 48 hours, High Arbiter. The human delegation walked out of the chamber, leaving chaos behind them. In 200 years of membership, humanity had never once walked out of a council session. They had never issued demands. They had never shown anything but patient diplomacy. Courtesy mode was off, and the galaxy was about to learn what that actually meant. Within an hour of the human delegation's departure, Ambassador Thalassa requested an emergency private meeting. Alina agreed, and the Delphini arrived at the human quarters with visible anxiety in her movements. Her tank's water swirled faster than normal, a sign of distress in her species. "You have to reconsider," Thalassa said, before anyone could offer greeting protocols. "Please, Ambassador Vasquez, you do not understand what you have done." Alina gestured for Thalassa to enter fully, and the door sealed behind her. The privacy field activated with a soft hum. "We understand perfectly," Alina said. Her tone was not unkind, but it was firm in a way Thalassa had never heard from a human before. "No, you do not." Thalassa's translator carried urgency. "The Kethrans will never agree to your demands. Never. You have backed them into a corner, where accepting would mean losing face across the entire Dominion. This will mean war." Dr. Okonkwo brought up a display showing council voting records from the past century. "Ambassador Thalassa, in the last 100 years, how many times has the council voted to enforce its own laws against the Kethran Dominion?" That is not relevant, 0 times, Okonkwo interrupted gently. The answer is 0. How many species have filed formal complaints about Kethran expansion? Thalassa was silent. 47, Okonkwo continued. 47 different species have complained. The council has held debates, passed resolutions, formed committees, and nothing has changed. Do you know why? Because no one wants to fight them, Thalassa admitted quietly. Exactly, Lena stepped forward. We have been studying council politics for 200 years, Ambassador. While everyone assumed we were naive newcomers learning the ropes, we were actually taking notes. We know the Kethrans have been bullying smaller species for centuries. We know most of you are terrified of them. We know the council has no real enforcement mechanism because none of you are willing to be the enforcer. Commander Wright pulled up new displays. Holographic representations of the Kethran military filled the air. 12 massive dreadnoughts, their designs impressive by council standards. Hundreds of support vessels. Millions of trained soldiers. The display showed battle records from their 40 conquests. Every single one had been against species with minimal military capacity. This is why the Dominion frightens you, Wright said. And honestly, by council standards, it is an impressive force. He pressed a control, and the display shifted. New ships appeared in the hologram. Human vessels, with design specifications that made Thalassa's water tank practically shake. This is what humanity actually has, Wright stated. 60 dreadnoughts, each more advanced than anything in the Kethran fleet. 1,500 cruisers, 4,000 destroyers, thousands of autonomous hunter-killer drones that can operate independently for months. Weapon systems that the Council does not have classification standards for because nothing like them exists in your military frameworks. The numbers were staggering. Thalassa stared at the display in disbelief. But your reports. Your first contact documentation said you had minimal military capability. You claimed to be explorers and traders. We lied, Elena said simply. We wanted to be accepted, not feared. We wanted to observe and learn before revealing our capabilities. And we wanted to give the Council a chance to be what it claimed to be, a peaceful organization dedicated to cooperation and mutual benefit. But clearly that was optimistic, Okonkwo added. The Council is peaceful only because most member species lack the capacity for serious warfare. The moment someone like the Kethrans shows military strength, everyone else bows. That is not peace. That is just slow-motion conquest. Lassa swirled in her tank, processing this information. So you have been deceiving us for 2 centuries? We have been protecting you, Wright corrected. If we had shown up with our full military capacity visible, what would have happened? Either the Council would have treated us as a threat and tried to limit our expansion, or aggressive species would have seen us as a challenge and started conflicts. Neither outcome serves anyone's interests. Lena sat down, her expression softening slightly. Thalassa, we genuinely want to be part of this galactic community. We like most of you. We value the trade relationships, the cultural exchanges, the scientific cooperation, but we are not willing to be victims. And we are not willing to watch others be victimized either. So this is about more than just New Providence, Thalassa realized. Much more, Elena confirmed. This is about establishing that there are consequences for aggression in this council. The Kethrans need to learn that they cannot simply take what they want through legal manipulation and military threats. But they will fight rather than submit to your demands, Thalassa insisted. You are forcing a war, Wright shook his head. No, we are calling a bluff. The Kethrans have gotten away with their behavior because they have never faced serious resistance. They are bullies, Ambassador. And bullies back down when someone actually punches back. You cannot know that. Actually, we can. Okonkwo brought up psychological profiles and historical analysis. We have studied Kethran culture extensively. They are aggressive, but not suicidal. They expand because it works and because it is profitable. But they are fundamentally pragmatic. When the cost of conquest exceeds the benefit, they stop. We are simply making the cost very clear. A new voice joined the conversation. Harmony Vangels, the Veradics representative, had somehow gained access to the human quarters. The crystalline being refracted the room's light into complex patterns. I disabled the door security, Harmony of Angles said without apology. I needed to hear this conversation. Alina did not look particularly surprised. The Vratics are very good with technology. We expected you might find a way in. If you've always been this dangerous, Harmony of Angles asked, why did you hide it? The Vratics value honesty above all else. This deception troubles me. Dr. Okonkwo turned to face the crystal being. Because we wanted to be better than what we were. Humanity spent 10,000 years being the most violent species on our planet. We killed each other in numbers that would horrify most council species. By the time we reached space, we were very, very good at warfare. But we were tired of it. She pulled up images of Earth from different eras. Ancient battles, medieval sieges, world wars, nuclear standoffs. Then newer images of the same locations transformed into cities, parks, monuments to peace. We proved to ourselves that we could stop, Okonkwo continued. We proved we could control our violent instincts and build something better. But when we met the council, we were afraid. Afraid that you would see us as monsters, afraid that our reputation would define us before we could show you who we wanted to be. So you pretended to be harmless, Harmony of Angles stated. We pretended to be harmless, Alina agreed. And in doing so, we hoped to learn if the galactic community was truly peaceful or just pretending like us. The answer, unfortunately, is that you are pretending. The Council maintains peace not through genuine cooperation but through fear of stronger species. The Kethrans are just the most obvious example. The Lhasa spoke again, her water settling slightly. What happens after this? If the Kethrans agree to your terms, what then? Do humans become the new bullies? Do you use your military superiority to dictate terms to everyone? No, Alina said firmly. Because unlike the Kethrans, we have actually experienced what it means to live in a society where might makes right. We know how that ends. It ends with everyone dead or enslaved. Wright brought up a new document. We want the Council to implement real enforcement mechanisms. We want protection for smaller species written into law with actual consequences for violation. We want aggressive expansion to have costs that matter. And yes, we are willing to be the muscle for that system if needed. But we want it to be a system, Okonkwo emphasized. Not ruled by human military power. We want laws that apply to everyone, including us. We want a council that actually functions as a peacekeeping organization. Not a debate club that writes strongly worded letters while the strong devour the weak. Harmony of Angles' crystal structure pulsed with thought. You are proposing a fundamental restructuring of council operations. Yes, Alina confirmed. And we are starting with the Kethrans because they are the clearest example of the current system's failure. Once they back down, other species will see that aggression has consequences. Then we can build something better. And if they do not back down? The Lhasa asked quietly. Elena's expression hardened. Then we will teach them why human military forces exist. But I do not believe it will come to that. The Kethrans are pragmatic. They will calculate the cost of fighting us versus the cost of agreeing to our terms. They will choose survival. You sound very confident, Harmony of Angles observed. We are right, said. Because we have been preparing for this moment for 200 years, every trade agreement, every cultural exchange, every diplomatic session has been gathering information. We know the Kethron military inside and out. We know their supply lines, their strategic doctrine, their ship vulnerabilities. If they fight, they will lose badly. And they know we know this. The room fell silent for a long moment. Then Thalassa swirled in her tank with what might have been resignation. You've changed everything in a single day. No, Alina corrected gently. We have simply stopped pretending. The galaxy was always this way. We are just making it visible. Harmony of Angles turned to leave, then paused. The Vratics will watch this situation carefully. If you succeed in creating fair enforcement mechanisms, we will support them. But if you become what you claim to oppose, we will remember this conversation. Fair enough, Alina said. After the other ambassadors left, the human delegation sat in silence for a moment. Finally, Wright spoke. 46 hours left on the clock. Think they will actually respond with force? They will try to intimidate us first, Alina predicted. Show of force, aggressive posturing. They need to save face with their own people. But actual combat? I give it less than 10% probability. And if you are wrong? Okonkwo asked. Elena's smile returned, sharp and certain. Then we show the galaxy what happens when humans stop being polite and start being honest. The Cathron response came at the 36-hour mark, not through diplomatic channels or formal council proceedings, but through raw military force. 8 Cathron warships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Harmony's edge system, their massive hulls bristling with weapons. Every species on the station received the same broadcast. High Arbiter Sarnek's face filled screens throughout the facility. His forearms spread in what the Kethrons considered a display of dominance. The Kethron Dominion does not negotiate with species that make unreasonable demands, Sarnek declared. We do not bow to threats from prey animals who have grown too bold. These vessels will remain in position until the humans withdraw their insulting proposal and accept our original terms regarding New Providence. This is your final opportunity to show wisdom. The broadcast ended. Alarms began sounding across Harmony's edge as the station went into emergency protocols. The 8 Kethran warships positioned themselves in a loose sphere around the station, weapons powered but not yet locked on targets. It was a classic intimidation tactic that had worked for the Dominion countless times before. Within minutes, several council species began broadcasting statements. The Chiton Collective called for immediate negotiation. 3 smaller species that had been conquered by the Kethrans decades ago issued statements supporting the Dominion's position, clearly made under threat. Even some of the more powerful species began drafting proposals for human concessions. Ambassador Thalassa tried to reach Alina directly, but the human quarters showed no response. The privacy fields were active and impenetrable in the council chamber. Species representatives gathered in an emergency session without human presence. The chairman called for order as debates erupted across the floor. The humans have provoked this crisis, declared the representative from the Chiton Collective. Their aggressive demands have brought military vessels to a neutral station. This is unacceptable. The Cathrons violated the Harmony Accords by bringing warships to this system, Harmony Evangels countered. They are the ones threatening violence, not humanity. But the humans started this with impossible demands. Another species protested. The arguments continued for hours. Some species condemned the Kethrans for the military display. Others condemned humanity for making demands that led to it. The Aetherians, beings of pure principle who had never taken sides in any conflict, began preparing to evacuate the station entirely. Then, at the 40-hour mark, humanity's response arrived. A single ship emerged from hyperspace. Not a massive dreadnought or even a full-size cruiser. It was a destroyer-class vessel, relatively small compared to the Kethran warships surrounding the station. Its hull was dark gray, its profile sleek and efficient. The name painted along its side read Courtesy's End. Commander Wright's voice came through on all frequencies, calm and professional. Kethran vessels, you are in violation of the Harmony Accords by bringing military ships into this neutral system. You have 12 hours to leave. This is your only warning. In the council chamber, several species began emergency evacuation procedures. 8 massive warships against 1 destroyer. This was not going to be a negotiation. This was going to be a slaughter. Everyone wanted to be far away when it started. Sarnek's response was immediate and mocking. His laughter came through the translation systems with cruel amusement. 1 ship? The humans send 1 small destroyer against the might of the Dominion fleet. This is your great military power? This is what was supposed to frighten us. The Kethron fleet activated targeting systems. Weapons locking onto the Courtesy's End. 8 warships against 1 destroyer. The outcome seemed inevitable. Then something happened that none of the council species had seen before. The Courtesy's End did not fire conventional weapons. Its hull opened in dozens of small ports, and from each one emerged a stream of tiny objects. They looked like dark spheres, each no larger than a human fist. Thousands of them deployed in seconds, spreading out in every direction in patterns that seemed random, but were actually precisely calculated. The Kethron ships opened fire. Energy beams lanced through space, destroying dozens of the small spheres. Missiles launched, their tracking systems trying to lock onto the swarm, but there were too many targets, and they moved too fast. The spheres were not fleeing. They were advancing. Within 3 minutes, every Kethron warship had hundreds of the small spheres attached to its hull. They clamped onto critical systems, weapon ports, shield generators, engine assemblies, life support intakes. Then they simply stopped moving and went dormant. Commander Wright's voice returned to all frequencies. Kethron, vessels, I am now going to explain your situation. Each of your ships has approximately 200 autonomous demolition charges attached to critical systems. They are currently inactive. You have 2 choices. He paused, letting the translation systems catch up across all species communication networks. Choice 1. Leave this system within the next hour. The charges will detach once you enter hyperspace and return to my vessel. You will suffer no damage. Choice 2. Attempt to remove the charges, attempt to destroy my ship, or remain in this system past the deadline. The charges will activate, disabling but not destroying your vessels. I recommend choice 1. Silence filled the communication channels. On Harmony's edge, every species watched their displays in shock. The Kethron fleet, the force that had conquered 40 systems, sat frozen in space, covered in tiny explosive charges. One Kethron captain, either braver or more foolish than the others, decided to test the humans' claim. His crew began attempting to manually remove the charges from their ship's hull. Suited Kethron engineers floated out with tools, approaching the nearest cluster of spheres. The moment their tools touched the first device, 30 charges across that ship simultaneously fired. They did not explode violently. Instead, each one released a precisely controlled electromagnetic pulse. The Kethron warship went dark. Every system shut down at once. Power core, life support, communications, propulsion, weapons. The ship simply stopped functioning and began drifting in space. The other 7 Kethron ships stopped moving entirely. The test had been conclusive. That was your demonstration, right? Said calmly. That vessel's crew is in no danger. Life support will fail in approximately 8 hours, which gives you plenty of time to rescue them after you leave this system. The charges have now reset to standby mode. The rest of you still have the same choice. Leave or experience the same fate. On the disabled ship, emergency backup systems began activating, providing minimal life support. It would be enough to keep the crew alive, but nothing more. The ship was effectively a floating coffin until someone towed it away. Sarnik's voice came through finally, stripped of its earlier mockery. You are attacking Dominion vessels. This is an act of war. No, Wright replied. You brought military vessels to a neutral station in violation of the Harmony Accords. You activated weapon systems and locked targeting solutions on my ship. Under council law, I have the right to defend myself and this station. Everything I have done is legal self-defense. Everything you have done is illegal aggression. I am offering you a chance to leave without further embarrassment. The Dominion does not flee from prey species. Sarnak tried to maintain his dignity, but his voice wavered. Then your ships will be disabled like your colleagues, and you will drift in space until someone rescues you. Your choice. You have 58 minutes. The communication ended. The galaxy watched and waited. In the council chamber, Thalassa turned to Harmony Vangels. They planned this. Every detail. They knew exactly what the Kethrons would do. Yes, the Vratics agreed. Humans are very good at warfare. They have had 10,000 years of practice. 30 minutes passed in tense silence. Then 40. The disabled Kethron ship continued drifting, its crew alive but helpless. The other 7 ships remained frozen, their captains surely calculating odds and reporting to their commanders. At the 55-minute mark, one Kethron ship's engines activated. It turned away from the station and began moving toward the hyperspace jump point. The small spheres attached to its hull detached smoothly. firing small thrusters that sent them drifting back toward the Courtesy's end. Then a second ship turned to leave. Then a third. Within 10 minutes, all 7 functional Kethran warships had retreated to the hyperspace boundary and jumped away, leaving their disabled comrade behind. The small demolition charges, now numbering in the thousands, returned to the Courtesy's end like a school of fish. Disappearing back into the launch ports they had emerged from, Commander Wright sent one final transmission. Council vessels, you may now safely approach the disabled Kethran ship to provide rescue services to its crew. They will need medical attention and transport. The disabled systems will reset in approximately 12 hours. Once the residual electromagnetic effects dissipate. Now the Courtesy's end turned and began, moving toward a standard docking approach to Harmony's. Edged out in the council chamber. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then the Chiton Collective representative, whose species had witnessed dozens of Kethran conquests, began making a sound that the translators struggled with before finally rendering as laughter. 200 years, the Chiton delegate said. 200 years we watched humans smile and apologize and back down. And all that time, they were carrying this in their pocket. Elena Vasquez's voice came through the chamber's communication system. The human delegation will return to council chambers in 1 hour to discuss our proposal regarding New Providence and Kethran reparations. We look forward to a productive conversation. Thalassa swirled in her tank, patterns of respect forming in her water. They did not kill anyone. They could have destroyed all 8 ships, but they chose not to, because that was never the point, Harmony Vangels observed. They wanted to prove capability, not cruelty. They wanted the Kethrans to understand what they face if they continue aggression. And now, everyone knows. The galaxy had just learned what humans looked like when courtesy mode turned off. It was not what anyone had expected. The council chamber felt different when it reconvened. The same species sat in the same positions, but the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. Representatives who had previously paid minimal attention to human statements watched Elena Vasquez with careful focus as she entered the chamber. High Arbiter Sarnak was notably absent. In his place sat Junior Arbiter the Sec, a younger Kethran whose scales showed lighter coloring and whose forearms moved with less confidence. He had arrived on an emergency shuttle 2 hours earlier with new authorization from the Dominion's central government. The council chairman called the session to order, his crystal structure showing unusual patterns that suggested stress. We will now address the matters concerning New Providence and related proposals. Thesek stood immediately. His voice came through the translators without the arrogance Sarnak had carried. The Kethron Dominion withdraws all claims on the colony world designated New Providence. We acknowledge that our legal interpretation was flawed. We apologize to humanity for any distress caused by our proposal. The chamber went silent. Several species exchanged shocked glances. The Kethrans never apologized. Never, Thesek continued, reading from a prepared statement. Additionally, the Dominion agrees to return full sovereignty to Tarvik, Kellyan Prime and Kessler Station effective immediately. Colonial administrators will be withdrawn within 6 months, during which time native populations will establish new governments. The Dominion will pay reparations as outlined in the human proposal. He sat down. The entire statement had taken less than 2 minutes. No negotiation, no counteroffers, no legal maneuvering. Complete capitulation. Elena stood slowly. Her courtesy mode smile was back, but now everyone in the chamber could see it for what it was. A choice, not a reflex. The human delegation accepts the Kethran Dominion's response. We consider this matter resolved and look forward to productive future relations with the Dominion. That should have been the end of it. The crisis resolved, order restored. But Ambassador Thalassa requested recognition from the chairman. With respect to all parties, Thalassa began. Her water swirling with purpose, I believe this incident has revealed deeper issues within council operations. The human delegation mentioned wanting to discuss enforcement mechanisms and protection for smaller species. I believe we should address those topics now, while recent events are fresh in everyone's minds. Harmony Vangels immediately added support. The Vratics agree. What we witnessed today was not typical council conflict resolution. It was effective precisely because typical council methods do not work. We should examine why. Over the next hour, species after species requested time to speak. The smaller species that had lived under Kethron threat for decades found new courage. The Delphine shared data on how much of their economy went toward avoiding Kethron attention. The Chiton Collective presented records of aggressive expansion by multiple species that the Council had ignored. Through it all, Alina listened without interrupting. This was what she had wanted. Not just to stop one Kethron claim, but to force the Council to acknowledge its systemic failures. Finally, the chairman recognized her again. Ambassador Vasquez, your delegation seems to have anticipated this conversation. Do you have proposals prepared? We do, Chairman. Dr. Okonkwo brought up detailed documents on the central display. The human delegation proposes the creation of the Council Defense Force, a voluntary military organization with the authority to enforce Council law and protect member species from aggression. She outlined the framework. Member species could contribute ships, personnel, or resources based on their capabilities. Enforcement actions would require votes from a reformed council structure that gave smaller species more voice. Humans would provide the initial military backbone but would not have unilateral authority. This is not about human control, Alina emphasized. This is about creating real consequences for aggression. The Kethrons backed down today because they understood the cost of continuing. Every species in this council should have that same protection. The debates that followed lasted 3 days. Species argued over details, worried about implications, and negotiated terms. But the fundamental momentum was clear. Too many species had been victims of aggression with no recourse. Too many had watched the council fail to protect its own members. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Junior Arbiter Desic requested recognition on the final day of debate. The Kethron Dominion supports the creation of the Council Defense Force, he stated. The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. The Dominion has operated under the assumption that military strength provided safety and prosperity. Recent events have shown us that this approach creates enemies rather than security. We would prefer to live in a galaxy where laws matter more than military capacity. It was a complete reversal of Kethron policy, and it broke the remaining opposition. If even the Kethrons would accept enforcement mechanisms, who could argue against them? The vote came on the evening of the third day. The Council Defense Force was established with 38 species voting in favor, 2 abstaining, and none opposed. Humanity was named lead coordinator for military operations, but oversight committees would include representatives from 20 different species. After the vote, Alina found herself surrounded by ambassadors requesting private meetings. 23 species wanted to discuss formal defense pacts with humanity. Smaller species that had never had a voice in council politics suddenly wanted to talk about cooperation and mutual protection. Thalassa approached last, after most others had left. You planned all of this from the beginning, didn't you? 200 years of playing weak, gathering information, learning our weaknesses. Then one dramatic demonstration to change everything. Elena shook her head. Not from the beginning. When we first joined the council, we genuinely hoped it would be what it claimed to be. We hoped we could be peaceful explorers and traders. But after a few decades of watching how things actually worked, we realized we had a choice. We could stay quiet and watch injustice continue, or we could use our capabilities to make things better. And you chose to make things better, Thalassa said. You chose to try, Elena corrected. This is just the beginning. Building real enforcement mechanisms will take years. Changing the culture of the council will take longer. But today was a start. Harmony of angles joined them, refracting the station's light into rainbow patterns. A question, if I may. Now that the galaxy knows what humanity is capable of, what prevents you from becoming what the Kethrons were? You have the military power to dominate. What makes you different? Alina was quiet for a moment, considering her answer carefully. Because we have been the Kethrons. On Earth, we were divided into thousands of nations, and for most of our history, the strong dominated the weak. We know exactly where that path leads. It leads to endless cycles of violence, rebellion, and collapse. Empires built on force always fall. She gestured at the council chamber around them. We want something better. We want a civilization where species cooperate because it benefits everyone, not because they fear the alternative. We want laws that protect the weak from the strong. We want a galaxy where our children can explore without weapons always at the ready. But you still have weapons at the ready, Thalassa observed. Because we are not naive, Commander, Wright said. Joining the conversation? Peace through strength means being strong enough that no one wants to test you, but restrained enough that no one needs to fear you. It means being willing to fight, but preferring not to. It means showing teeth without using them unless absolutely necessary, Dr. Okonkwo added. Humans spent 10,000 years learning this balance the hard way. We made every possible mistake. We built empires and watched them crumble. We fought wars that killed millions and achieved nothing. We nearly destroyed our own planet multiple times. Every lesson we learned cost thousands or millions of lives. So you are sharing those lessons with us, Harmony Vangel said, as Alina confirmed. We do not want the galaxy to learn the way we did. If our history can spare other species the same pain, then maybe all that suffering meant something. 5 years passed. The changes in the Council were dramatic and fundamental. The Council Defense Force operated with 30 ships contributed by various species and 40 human vessels, providing backbone support. It had responded to 6 incidents of aggressive expansion, and in every case, the mere presence of enforcement capabilities had been enough to resolve conflicts peacefully. The Kethran Dominion had transformed. Internal political reforms had replaced aggressive expansion with economic development. They were now considered model council members. Their military reduced, but their prosperity increased through legitimate trade. 17 species that had lived in fear for generations now had formal defense pacts with humanity, not because they were forced to, but because they chose to. The relationship was genuinely mutual. Humanity provided military protection, and partner species contributed resources, technology, and cultural exchange. The smaller species that had never had voices in council politics now held significant power through reformed voting structures. Decisions required consensus across multiple tiers of membership, preventing any single species or bloc from dominating. Human ships patrolled contested borders, not as conquerors, but as peacekeepers. Human diplomats still smiled in council sessions, but now everyone understood what that smile meant. Courtesy was still there, but it was courtesy backed by capability and will. Alina Vasquez had retired from active diplomatic service, placed by a younger generation of ambassadors who had grown up after the transformation. But she attended council sessions occasionally as an advisor. On one such visit, a young representative from a species that had joined the council only recently approached her with questions. Ambassador Vasquez, I studied the historical records of your first confrontation with the Kethrons. I wanted to ask, were you certain it would work? The demonstration with the courtesies end? The demands? The whole strategy? What if the Kethrons had called your bluff? Alina smiled, and it was the genuine smile of someone remembering a calculated risk. It was not a bluff. If the Kethrons had chosen to fight, we would have fought. But we studied them for 200 years. We knew their psychology, their strategic doctrine, their cultural values. We knew they would back down when faced with superior force. But you could not have been completely certain, the young diplomat pressed. No, Helena admitted. There is never complete certainty in diplomacy or warfare. But we were certain of this. Continuing to smile and back down while the strong preyed on the weak was not acceptable. If we had to fight to change that, we were prepared to fight. Sometimes the risk of action is less than the certainty of consequences from inaction. She looked around the council chamber, watching representatives from dozens of species working together on complex problems with genuine cooperation. The galaxy is not perfect now, Alina said. There are still conflicts, still disagreements, still species that push boundaries. But there are also consequences for aggression. There are protections for the vulnerable. There are laws that actually mean something. That is worth the risk we took. The young diplomat nodded thoughtfully, then asked one more question. Do humans still operate in courtesy mode? Alina laughed quietly. every day. Courtesy mode is not weakness. It is civilization. It is choosing to be gentle when you could be harsh, choosing to negotiate when you could dominate, choosing to smile when you could threaten. The difference is that now everyone knows it is a choice. She stood to leave, preparing to catch a shuttle back to Earth. The real strength is not in turning courtesy mode off. The real strength is in being able to turn it back on. That is what makes us civilized, instead of just dangerous. As she walked through Harmony's Edge for the last time, representatives from a dozen species stopped to greet her, to thank her, to share news of their peoples. Humans had earned something more valuable than fear or dominance. They had earned respect and genuine friendship, and in the end, that was what humanity had always wanted. Not subjects or territories or empire, just a place in the galactic community where they could be themselves, dangerous when necessary, gentle by choice, and always committed to making things better than they found them. The day the Council witnessed humanity's courtesy mode turn-off had changed everything. But more importantly, it had shown that courtesy, backed by capability, could transform a galaxy. Peace through strength. Civilization through choice. That was humanity's gift to the stars.